with Responsible Eating and Living. We came down from New York to visit the state of Florida, and this is where many of the conventional tomatoes are grown. I recently interviewed Barry Estabrook and talked about his new book, Tomatoland, and found out some really fascinating things about conventional tomatoes. One of the things is that they're grown in this sand. To find out more about how tomatoes are grown here in Florida and why you may not want to be buying these tomatoes or eating them, watch this. Hi, I'm Karen Hartglass with Responsible Eating and Living, and I'm here in Manhattan at Blossom Restaurant. It's a vegan, organic restaurant with lots of wonderful food. And before we go downstairs and have some dinner, I'm here talking with Barry Estabrook about his new book, Tomatoland. Hi, Barry, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you.
This book is all about tomatoes, and in particular industrial tomatoes grown in Florida. So many people have no idea what goes into growing a simple tomato today. And if they knew, I think they'd really be unpleasantly surprised.
Well, I chose the Florida tomato because in many ways it's a poster child for everything that's wrong with modern industrial agriculture. Florida overall produces a third of the fresh tomatoes that we eat in the country overall. During the wintertime, there are periods when almost every tomato, fresh tomato, consumed in the United States is grown in Florida. Yet Florida is one of the worst places you could think of to grow tomatoes because it's so humid there. And tomatoes, if you've never tried to grow them at home, you know this, hate humidity, and everything that will kill a tomato thrives in wet, humid conditions. Not only do they have to be treated with pesticides and fungicides because of the humidity, all of the food has to be supplied to them that they're ever going to eat, usually in the form of artificial fertilizer that's put into the sand, and then you hope you get enough in for that crop of tomatoes to spend the next few months growing. Well, it's a very good thing for the giant supermarket chains and fast food companies that buy most of them. It's a very good thing for the growers who grow them because they can be harvested. They're harvested bright green and gassed with ethylene to turn them the right color. But they're harvested, they're just bright green. So it's a great product for industry. The only loser is the consumer, who's getting something that, as you said, is tasteless and is lacks nutrition. A modern tomato has a third less vitamin C than a tomato did in the 1960s. If you go down the list of nutrients, these are United States Department of Agriculture statistics, every good nutrient is less until you hit sodium. Salt, and it's 14 times as much sodium in a modern industrial tomato as there was in a tomato in the 1960s.
I'm holding this one, and this is not a sample. This is an organic, locally grown tomato, as are all of the ones that I have here, this beautiful yellow tomato. And can we find heirloom tomatoes that don't have as much sodium?
The tomatoes you grow that are heirlooms, or the types you grow in your garden, are much better because they haven't been bred. I mean, the modern tomato is bred primarily for yield. Mm-hmm. As a farmer told me, I don't get paid for flavor, I get paid by the pound. And so they want a tough tomato that gives a tremendous yield per plant.
Well, I guess some people don't even know what a real tomato should taste like.
I've had people come up to me when I talk about this book, young people particularly, and in one case, a young woman came up to me and she said, "I've never had a good tasting tomato." It's sad. We food people like to throw these phrases around like local, organic, sustainable, fair trade. they almost become like mantras. But the fact is, they do mean something. And when you strip all of those away, you end up with a tasteless, hard winter tomato.
It's called industrial agriculture, but some people call it conventional. And I think there's nothing conventional about what's going on with industrial agriculture today.
It's weird that they sort of usurped that, right? Because what we know of as industrial agriculture was invented basically after World War II.
And what's happened since then that makes this conventional tomato so frightening?
Well, there were two things. There was great progress in the manufacture of artificial fertilizers.
Progress is an interesting word.
Well, okay, yes. Okay.
There were developments.
There were developments. And secondly, also from the war effort, there were great developments, strides in chemical pesticides and herbicides. And those two things sort of gave birth to the modern, large industrial agriculture.
Well, you have to read this book, Tomatoland, to really find out what's going on with industrial tomatoes. But just a few things. To start with, as you mentioned, the tomatoes are grown with toxic, some of them are extremely toxic, like methyl bromide, these herbicides and pesticides. But in addition, and I think this is what really affected me the most, was that there's slavery going on. Some of the workers that are involved in growing these tomatoes are treated like slaves.
The only thing I'd quibble with you about is the word "like."
Oh,
they are slaves.
They are slaves.
I mean, let's run down a few of the things. These are all in court documents in southwestern Florida. People being shackled in chains at night. People being bought and sold, bargained for, like chattels. People being beaten for not working hard enough.
This is 2011, and we're talking about people in Florida.
This sounds a lot like 1850, doesn't it, on a plantation? And the United States Attorney for that area describes it as ground zero for modern day slavery, and he's got a point. And he's freed 1,200 people in the last 10 or 15 years.
It's very upsetting. So any conventional tomato that you may eat in a standard restaurant, in a salad, in a sandwich, in a fast food restaurant, if it's come from Florida, it's very likely that, and maybe likely, it's guaranteed that slaves have produced that tomato.
You know, that wasn't me talking. That again was a quote from the United States Attorney down there. He's a man not prone to exaggerate. But when I asked him, I said, "Is it a possibility?" He said, "It's not a possibility. It's a guarantee. If you eat a tomato regularly, eat supermarket or fast food tomatoes out of season, you've probably eaten a fruit picked by the hand of a slave."
Well, is that something that we really want to promote or support? So I hope people think about, when they're eating a tomato, what's going on behind it. And if it's hard to believe, then Tomatoland is definitely a book that needs to be read. Okay, so there is a bright side. We can have tomatoes without toxic chemicals. We can have tomatoes without slavery being involved. How is that, and where is that being done?
Well, it's being done all over the country. I mean, people say, "Where's the best tomato?" And I would say the closer a tomato is grown to your kitchen counter, the better it's going to be. If you have a yard or even a deck, an apartment deck, or with a sunny area in it, you can grow tomatoes. You can grow quite a few tomatoes. It's worth trying. They're a great sort of gateway fruit to gardening. But barring that, there's more than 5,000 farmers markets in the country now, so somewhere near you there is a farmer's market, and they are growing terrific tomatoes.
Organic too.
And they are often organic. And typically, I spent some time with a grower in Pennsylvania who supplies markets in the New York City area, and he would pick his tomatoes on a Thursday, and they would be in the market Friday at 7 in the morning. A winter tomato may be on the road for 2 weeks.
Well, we know a number of things. We know that food that is freshly harvested is the most nutritious. And as it stays in the stores or on trucks and time goes by, a lot of the nutrition is gone. But even if you don't care about nutrition, even if you don't care about toxic chemicals being on your tomatoes, and if for some reason you don't care that people are abused and exploited in growing your tomato, how about a tomato that doesn't taste like anything?
Well, you know, that's it. A winter tomato is food porn in the purest sense. It looks nice, it looks appealing, it makes you want to eat it.
It's red.
It's red, but it isn't a tomato. It bears no resemblance to a summer-grown heirloom tomato that you, yes, there
and
you
let's
go.
look at
right
this
there.
beautiful specimen. Now, it's not perfectly round. It's not uniform in color. In fact, it's kind of red on the bottom. It's really a work of art, I think. There's lovely specks of green and yellow. It's got a kind of an odd shape.
If you were a Florida tomato farmer,
Yeah.
and you grew that tomato, it would be illegal for you to sell it outside of the state.
Illegal to sell it out of Florida.
There's a group called the Florida Tomato Commission that controls the shape,
So they
size.
can't grow heirloom tomatoes like this?
They can't ship them outside of the state. This
Whoa.
thing, first of all, look, it's gut. See that? Oh,
Yeah.
never allow that. See that blemish?
Yeah.
No, absolutely
That's
not.
crazy.
This they call the stem scar. That's way too deep.
Really
And
ugly.
these creases are way too. You know, they're looking for the sort of poster child. You know,
right, the perfect
and
round
that's
red
what you can sell.
that you
in
can
this-
slice and put
Yeah,
on a hamburger or a sandwich or something.
Exactly. Go to a market and get a supermarket tomato or two.
Oh, compare the difference.
Well, you can. I'm not going to do it with this, but you can literally, you know, just drop them on the floor and bowl them, and they don't. You can try this at home.
Don't try this at home. Well, these aren't.
Don't try it with these. No,
These
are-
aren't, so I imagine they don't roll.
They don't. They're not. If you did that too often, it would split.
They'd be just sauce.
Right.
Well, I think the most important thing for people is to really support the organic, locally grown, farmed food movement.
Well, I mean, exactly. When tomatoes are in season in your area, make a pig of yourself. I mean,
Right.
you know, I'm lucky I have a big garden, but I can. There's days in late summer where I'll have tomatoes fried for breakfast and on a sandwich for lunch and in a salad for dinner. And you know, once one weekend every late summer, we make a huge pot of red sauce that we then freeze in individual bags to use like as a quick spaghetti dinner or pasta dinner during the winter time.
Right,
By the
perfect.
time the frost hits, I don't want to see a tomato. I mean,
Maybe nature intended it that way.
I wonder.
Yeah. Well, Barry, thank you. Thank you so much for writing this book, and it's really very disturbing that this is going on. But I keep looking at the bright side, and just want to encourage everyone to support organic, locally grown food. It is really so important. And read this book, Tomatoland. Thank you, Barry. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.